You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, Lynn, Happy New Year. Congratulations on the nomination to be a Nobel laureate. You must feel great about that.
Well, that requires an explanation. First of all, it is not possible for someone to nominate someone for that prize unless they are invited to do so.
So they must have been invited.
No, they were not. He was invited several years ago when he didn't nominate me, and it failed, of course. But he simply doesn't understand the procedure. He's sending an independent letter that will not be considered at all.
Well, we don't know that for sure, Len. You never know whether
I do know that for sure.
Yeah?
Because about 15 or 20 years ago, I received a nomination package from the Nobel Committee to nominate someone.
Yeah.
And that is what's necessary. You have to fill out that document. So I know what the documents are. And it is stated in the Nobel Prize conditions that they do not accept nominations other than those that they request.
Oh, they have to solicit the person. Who did you nominate when they sent you that package? Do you remember?
Written chance.
And did he get it?
No.
Okay, interesting. Because
that's not unusual. It requires, usually what happens is that 2 or 3 nominations are needed. But in exceptional circumstances like last year, I can't think of the name of the name they've given to the discovery where you can interfere with DNA and RNA and edit it.
Oh, yeah, CRISPR editing, right. CRISPR gene editing.
CRISPR editing, yes. So that letter, I only sent it because I thought friends should know that there are people out there who are still interested in doing it, but it is completely without any use other than a notice.
Well, it can instigate further discussion and thought, right?
That might happen. I don't know.
I mean, it's rarefied air.
People who get an invitation.
Right. But it's rarefied air because we're really talking about the top 1/1000th of 1% of people in the world, right? If we have 10 billion people or whatever the magic number is today, there's not that many people.
I've already been nominated 3 times.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Do you think any of this has to do with the history of the dispute with the government over the ownership?
It could very well be.
Isn't that weird? Because to me, that's just completely irrelevant to the story. Like, you stood up for your right.
Well, we don't know that it's true. I don't know that it's true, but it is possible from my point of view. But
like, you have to have like a perfect record of not a single speeding ticket.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. I doubt that very much.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, the prize, for example, was given to a man by the name of Alexis Carrel back in 1912 or something like that for a surgical knot.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
There are kinds of bizarre situations like that.
Interesting.
Anyhow, I enjoyed your forwarding that article about Burns Restaurant.
Yeah, I hope you come out to Tampa and we can have dinner there someday, because it sounds
I'd like you to go there and
take Lee with me.
Take Lee with you, yeah.
Yeah, she would probably just have a salad and some broccoli or something. She's not.
Well, you can do that, doesn't she? Is she vegetarian?
Yeah, she tends to be like almost vegan at this point.
Well, it's take a meat eater with you.
Right, exactly. That's why I'm inviting you. Like, if you ever get out to Florida, that's definitely a place to go.
I've been there many times, and boy, it is phenomenal.
Right, because you were out here for a while, right? Weren't you out here teaching?
I was a professor at the University of Florida in Gainesville
Mm-hmm.
several years
Right.
before I quit in disgust.
Yeah, I imagine. So what do you think is the latest situation here on the COVID front? It seems like the data every day is something new, and I'm sure you're generally tracking it, and you've kept a very protective approach for yourself. Are you getting out at all these days, or are you staying in the same way?
I only go out once every week on Wednesday to pick up my mail. So I drive 7 or 8 miles to the Sea Ranch post office to pick up my mail. But I do not leave my car in front when I park in front of the post office until no human beings are visible.
Okay.
And I wear not only a mask, but a face shield,
Okay.
like a welder's shield.
Yeah.
And I also wear surgical gloves. And when I collect my mail and get back in the car, I rinse my hands and with 99% isopropyl alcohol, including the parts of the car that I touch, and keep my mask on, but remove the face guard, I guess. Yes, the face guard.
And then you UV light the packages, right? Don't you UV
Well,
light
I don't do that. I don't do that anymore because I've found studies that indicate the virus is rarely transmitted through that route.
Oh, the paper doesn't capture it?
What viruses adhere have to then get into your nose.
Right.
And that's very remote, possible, but improbable. Maybe you heard the latest information that both Pfizer and Moderna will have vaccines specifically designed to inhibit the replication of this
Omicron.
Yes.
Right.
Mutant.
Right.
Which people call now a variant. And I have not got an answer to my question of why the term variant is used, because it has absolutely no biological definition whatsoever. The correct term is either mutant or serotype, which is the word that I used for decades in respect to the variants of the common cold coronaviruses and also influenza coronaviruses. They're called serotypes.
Well, the interesting consequence of your behavioral change is you probably haven't had a cold for the last 2 years, or the flu, the normal flu.
Correct.
Like the interesting cost benefit approach to the mask and regime that various states and local officials have implemented is how many of the typical 40,000, 50,000 people a year that die of the common flu have actually not had that happen. Like in my household, I don't think anyone has had like the common cold or the flu in the last couple of years since we've put this whole regimen into place. Now, there have been instances where people have wondered when you cough or sneeze, is there something going on? But then you learn, no, nothing's going on. Maybe some dust was in the air. But you're a good example because you've actually taken to heart all these precautions in probably the most systematic way. Although it looks like you did get a haircut, I'm guessing you did go to a barber, right? For that?
No, I'll explain that.
Looks great.
I'm glad. No, I was visited for the first time in I don't know how many years. All 5 of my children.
Oh, nice.
Last weekend.
Great.
And that has not happened for many years because, of course, they're scattered all over. They have jobs and families.
Right.
And one of my daughters, my youngest daughter, for reasons that I'm not clear, many, many years ago, learned to barber her husband.
Wow. You got a free haircut.
And so anytime she visits me, She barbers my hair.
She did a great job.
She's learned how to do it pretty professionally.
Yeah.
And the last time she did it was about 2 years ago, or maybe less, maybe a year ago, because she visits me about every once or twice a year at least. She lives in Portland, Oregon. So that accounts for my haircut.
She actually brings like an electric razor. You have the scissors, the barber scissors, and the
electric shearing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So let me get back to your question about immunity to coronaviruses. First of all, the reason, a good reason why older people do not have as many colds as younger people is that the common cold viruses, and I don't know the latest number, but the last number that I knew was accurate was close to 200 or a little more than 200 serotypes of rhinoviruses, common cold viruses. So over the years, you and I have had colds and have become immune to those specific serotypes, making fewer and fewer of the 200 new to us immunologically. So the probabilities get fewer and fewer as you get older, get less and less as you grow older and older, that you will meet up with a rhinovirus that you didn't experience before.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So that's why it's rare for you and me to get a common cold. Also, there might be shared antigens between one or more of the serotypes, so that if you have a common cold, that may make you immune or partially immune to other serotypes because of shared antigenic structures.
Right.
I think that answers your question. I'm not sure. I thought I had another explanation.
Right. I haven't seen much reporting on what's actually going on in the statistical data about common colds and flus and death.
That's rarely discussed because I think that authorities are don't want to complicate the picture any more than many people think they have. Although I don't think they have, because I know the biology, but it's not only that problem, but I don't know whether you've seen articles recently about the suffering that Tony Fauci is undergoing as a result of these nutcases.
Right.
He has people parading in front of his house constantly.
Right.
He has 24/7 security.
Right.
For his family, his children. He's a modest guy. He lives in a modest house in Bethesda.
Right.
They're threatening to kill him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
A guy came from Missouri, I think, with a AK-47.
Wow.
Bound to kill him.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's how.
And they show they parade around his house with pictures of him behind bars.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you or I, who are innocent civilians, experiencing that. That's what Tony is experiencing.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, no good deed goes unpunished, it seems. And
he was a hero. People, of course, many of them too young at the time to even know about it. He was a hero to the HIV victims.
Right.
He met them. He spoke to them. He taught them about the biology of HIV. And he became a hero for them. In fact, it was President.
He served 6 presidents, right? Hasn't he? 6 or 7 presidents?
Yes, and he received from Clinton the National Medal of Honor.
Right.
Pinned around his neck. He deserved it.
Right.
So it's a tragedy. You hear very little about it, the occasional article, but it's such a sad life for him. Here he is a chief advisor to the president. head of the advisory committee on the vaccine, which he certainly is qualified to do. And on the other hand, his life is miserable.
Yeah, it's a good example of be careful how much fame you achieve, because it might actually redound to your detriment. I don't personally aspire to imagine being a billionaire like, say, Zuckerberg is in Facebook, and a whole number, Musk. I mean, there's a whole list of billionaires, right? I don't think they have any chance at all of doing normal things in the normal world in the normal way. Like, they can't go to Burns Steakhouse. We started the conversation.
Well, they have to just go in disguise.
Yeah, you either have to go in disguise, or you got to go with like a military entourage, because you could be kidnapped.
Either that, or you go with a beard and a mustache.
Right. I mean, it must be interesting what these celebrities do to avoid the paparazzis. But I worry more about when you get to that stage of billionairehood, you could easily be kidnapped for ransom. And it's a serious problem, even for non-billionaires, because there's so many stories in different countries, big cities in different countries, including our various cities, where that just happens. And then there's essentially a ransom request that's made, that you go through this torture trying to figure out, do you pay the ransom? Do you not pay the ransom? What do you do about it? I mean, it's a crazy world in that respect. And I got to believe that Tony Fauci must be saying to himself, what if one of my kids or grandkids gets, kidnapped?
Yeah. I've been borderline threatened many times.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were discommunicated or excommunicated by the Catholic Church, weren't you?
It was nonsense, because, of course, I'm not Catholic. But anyhow, there are many hundreds and hundreds of people who were outraged because they were told by a church, in a church tract, that I was making human virus vaccines by extracting the blood from babies.
Oh, brother.
And turning it into vaccine. I think I told you that story. Mm-hmm. So when I sit in my guest room, where I usually sit to watch TV programs, mm-hmm. there's a window to the outside right there. And that side of my house has an acre of woods.
Yeah.
And an entry driveway through the woods.
Right.
And I've told my children that frequently concerned about being exposed.
But aren't you in a gated community where you are these days? No? Because that's the new...
It's not gated. It just has a sign at the entrance of each of our roads telling people that these are private roads.
Yeah, I mean,
they're free to drive on.
It's a new model, though, in America, and you see it a lot, and not only in Florida, where, yeah, they do like a big gated approach, and they say it's like you're coming onto grounds that are private, and if you have no business here, you just can't get in, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's interesting, because my parents, when I said to them when they moved from New York, I said, well, why'd you move to Florida? I said, well, number one, the weather. Number two, the taxes, no state taxes. Number three, they said the communities are safe and gated, and they felt so much more security as a result of that. I said, in New York, they laughed. They said, in New York, even if it was gated, you wouldn't be able to stop someone from blaring through, because their view was New York was out of control. New York City was out of control. And, in those days, I guess, before Giuliani came into office, it was crime was out of control. But that's the other thing that I haven't seen statistics on, which is, I wonder if just generally crime is down because there aren't that many people, or as many people, kind of on the streets as a general, sort of a general population of people. They're just not out there as much.
Well, in some communities, but New York just had a terrible tragedy of 2 police officers shot and killed.
Right.
By some crazy person, which brings up the issue of, at least when I was living in Philadelphia, and in subsequent years, up to Ronald Reagan,
Right.
this country had institutions, physical institutions, to house people who were in a mental state where they could threaten other people's lives.
Right.
In Philadelphia, we had a place called Byberry. It was called, of course, a crazy house, but
Right.
it institutionalized people. Then Reagan came along, and he closed all of those places in California, and then it later spread throughout the other states. And those are the people who are living on the streets now.
Right.
That's why we have this unbelievable number of crazy things going on, of a woman being pushed off a subway platform and gotten killed in New York. You know about that.
Right.
That kind of thing really didn't exist, or it was so rare, it made headlines years prior to Reagan.
Right.
We really have to go back to having institutions that are run by the states to house individuals whose condition is irreversible and presents an immediate danger to other people.
Right. I mean, it's almost at some level like what's happened is there's been a super wealthy class of billionaires created, and there hasn't been yet, but it's probably coming, a taxing regime that actually enables that wealth to get taxed at rates that actually could produce enough money for what might be called the safety net, or might be called the basic, social services, because there's a fear of something that does already exist. To some degree, there's a version of democratic socialism that's in place, but it's sporadic based on who happens to be in office and what they want to do to engender votes or support. So we do have a safety net. If you are at the poverty level, there is something called Medicaid that will cover your basic health needs. It may not be perfect, but it's there. And in many ways, there are people that are above the poverty level that actually kind of go into this hole in the system where, well, it's not Medicaid and there really isn't Obamacare and they can't afford coverage. And so, to me, if you have a wealthy nation like Denmark and Sweden and others, they look at that bottom, and I don't think they have anywhere near the kind of homeless tragedy that we have, that you see in any big city, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco. I mean, it's pretty pathetic and pretty ugly, and seems to be getting worse. What's surprising to me is that we haven't seen some aspect of this COVID / Omicron / whatever the latest mutant is come in and really have an effect on the streets. Now, maybe it's there and just not obvious, right?
It's there.
It's probably there, just like part of a million other things.
That's where many of the people who are unvaccinated
Right.
are to be found.
Right. But do you think we're at the end of the tunnel of this? Because different people are suggesting that maybe Omicron is going to act as some sort of agent of immunity, or a herd type immunity is going to rise as a result of it, that there's actually a silver lining to Omicron. Do you think there's something to that?
Well, that's becoming a real possibility. Why? Because the Omicron, which is now almost the only one in circulation, produces far fewer hospitalizations than the other two. And it's also shares antigenic spike protein configurations with the other two, so that the vaccines against the first two are very effective, if not entirely effective, against this Omicron also. But the real hope is that at least by March or April of this year, both Pfizer and Moderna will have vaccines produced directly against Omicron. And although they won't be distributed to the entire country in March or April, because it takes time for them to rev up the production and the system for getting it into people's arms, that looks like a very probable outcome, which would then put the present pandemic into local epidemics in isolated areas, but not throughout the country. And finally, it will put the entire situation very close, if not identical, to the flu situation that I discussed with you many times over the past year or two.
Right.
That is the need to get a vaccination annually against a possible new mutant beyond the Omicron mutant.
I would go even further if I were the government and say, look, what we're going to throw in as a bonus when you get the annual vaccination, we're going to pay for an annual medical exam that'll tell you something about your cholesterol and your heart condition and a million different things that, of course, most people don't want to know, but that they might take some action if they learned what might be called basic health literacy. And I would almost make that a function of a freebie if you come and get the vaccination, kind of the way there are freebies if you give blood and freebies if you do a bunch of stuff like organ donation and that sort of thing. Make it an incentive for people to start thinking about taking care of their health, because that's one thing that it just seems to me we don't, as a country, really do in a way that you might say it could save a lot of lives for a very low cost when someone finds out, hey, you have a problem that you need to take care of. Like my brother, had he known what his situation was, I'm sure he could have dealt with it a lot earlier. I saw a guy today, by the way, that was the spitting image of my brother. I swear I did a double take when I saw him. I said, I thought it was my brother, like literally rising from the dead. The guy looked exactly like my brother, and he almost talked like my brother. I had to look twice or three times on it. It scared me. I thought it was a ghost. And I said, where are you from? And then the guy said, oh, yeah, I'm from, different part of Florida. Because I wanted to see if said, I'm from Brooklyn. It's like, holy moly, maybe you are my brother reincarnated or something. But I thought to myself, hey, my brother actually had an annual exam. He never did. He never would. He just didn't take care of his health. He just treated it like, if I go to the doctor, I'm going to hear bad news. So I don't want to go. Like, why do I want to hear bad news? I'd rather hear no news. And somehow that's better. It's a very opposite view to the way most educated people think of things. But of course, he dropped out from high school and smart guy, relatively in a lot of, street smarts, but never really wanted to know, never really cared to know. And then we finally found out it was all bad news, just as he predicted.
Well, those blood chemistry tests are amazingly accurate.
Right.
And it's all based on a really unbelievable system of bubbles running through tubing. I won't go into the details, but if you're interested, you should look it up. You can find it on a search engine. But it's a phenomenal system if you think about the number of blood chemistries that are done every day and look at the number of things that are being tested for each of those patients, each of those samples that are sent to the companies. It's absolutely phenomenal. And the reproducibility is about 99% accurate.
Right, but not that many people actually do it relative to the number of people.
Well, any physician worth their salt will insist on a blood chemistry being done on their patients annually, at least annually. But on the other hand, the current tests for the COVID-19 or the Omicron virus, and that's not even stipulated specifically. Those tests are very inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
They're 50% inaccurate in some cases.
Right.
And furthermore, they only tell you the condition, even if they're accurate half the time, at one point in time. As soon as you leave the vaccine test, you can be exposed within an hour or a day or a week. I don't understand why people are lining up in their cars for miles to get a test when the number of false positives and false negatives are so high. What does all that mean?
Well, part of it is
ridiculous.
Part of it is if you do any type of international travel, they require you to bring.
Well, that's a different thing. That's
but
fine.
even that you might say is hit or miss, right?
But the hundreds of the millions of people seeking the test today are not traveling out of the country.
Right.
They're living in the country, and the tests are highly inaccurate.
Right. It's arguably a big boondoggle. It's arguably something that money could be better used in
also, can you explain the behavior of your governor?
Oh, I think he's going to run for president, and he's doing a lot of foreplay in that direction.
Well, he's running on a platform of kill Fauci.
Well, I think he's doing stuff that he thinks that his base will buy into. I don't buy into that view, but he certainly does.
As an idiot, I can't understand how Floridian. Well, I guess I can. I've been in Florida. So I know that you have half your population, as we do in California.
It's pretty split. I have to say, I was surprised. There's a liberal contingent here, just like I think Austin, Texas. People like to say, it's really liberal Texas, but there's a contingent of conservatives in Austin as well. And even though it might be considered more liberal for Texas, but we do have a truly bifurcated country at the moment. And I unfortunately think that so far, President Biden has not really brought us together. And maybe it's impossible for anyone to bring together. But there was a funny joke. I don't know if you saw it. It was on a comedy show. What's the guy's name? Bill Maher. He said what should happen is that Biden should get divorced and Barack Obama should get divorced, and then Biden should marry Barack Obama, and Barack Obama should become the first lady in the next election. Like, effectively, because we have a 2-term limit for presidents, but given that now homosexuals can marry, or same-sex marriages are okay federally and in the states, if Barack Obama divorced Michelle Obama and Biden's wife, I forget her first name, divorced Joe Biden, then Joe and Barack could get married. And then Barack would be like the way Eleanor Roosevelt was for FDR, like running the country. And that would effectively do an end around the amendment of the Constitution that says presidents can only run for 2 terms. It's like he was saying, this is like the way to get someone in office that actually could maybe bring the country together as effectively the spouse of the president. Now, that's a pretty wild thought, but I thought to myself, what's in the book that says that Barack Obama couldn't be the vice president? I guess the possibility that he could become the president, and that would be a problem because he has to be ready to step in, and that would violate the rule. Because I would think even as vice president or secretary of state, he could wield a lot of power and actually maybe help the direction of the country, right? To some degree.
That reminds me of a joke I heard once about Florida that I thought was hysterical.
Okay.
And it was a joke based on the inaccuracy of cross-sectional studies. That is, where you study a population as they are today. For example, you ask them, well, same question today, as opposed to the far more accurate longitudinal study, where you study many people over their lifetime.
Right.
Then you get an accurate picture of the situation. So the joke was that in Florida, most people are born Jewish and die Hispanic.
That's funny.
If you do a longitudinal study, that's what I mean. A cross-sectional, a longitudinal study, that's what you're going to get.
Okay. I mean, that's a remarkable statement that might have some bit of accuracy to it, because there is.
It's absolute accuracy if you do it as a cross-sectional study, yeah. So tell me, it's still open-ended whether you're going to return, when you're going to return to California?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now Florida is sort of a more interesting place to live and work in an environment where people are not really living and working in a normal way in California. And they're not even living in a normal way or working in a normal way in Florida either, but there's a little more of a sense of normalcy with precautions, some precautions, although probably not as masked up as folks still are throughout the country. But people are getting vaccinated, and most people are pretty clear that they are only coming to meetings when they're vaccinated, or if they're with other vaccinated people. And they want to believe that there's some end in sight. And, they do use the card of, I don't really know that psychologically the country can continue in this hermit-like fashion that people are living. I'm not sure whether from a psychological harm point of view, you said this early on, there's a trade-off whenever you do a bunch of stuff, whether it's going to have other consequences in other directions, maybe even bankruptcies and depressions and a bunch of other stuff. I'm kind of surprised that the restaurants have actually stayed in business. I mean, a lot of them have gone out of business, but the fact that they seem to adapt to home delivery and adapt to other techniques for selling food.
You have no urgent intention to return to California?
No, right now we're taking care of Lee's mom, who's here under support.
But I can't imagine, unless you rented a already furnished house or had a second house in Florida, I can't imagine that your living circumstances in Florida are as elegant as they would be.
They're actually more elegant. We bought a house. No, Len, if you came to Florida, you'd be amazed. We bought a house here that would probably cost $10 million in California. We bought a house here for a tiny fraction of that, on the water, with a dock, with a lake, and with a gated community. And it's like 9,000 square feet. And it's got, it's got its own pool. It's got a hot tub. It's got like every little amenity that you can imagine. It's got a bigger.
That makes that using a completely different picture.
Yeah, no. So we moved all of our furnishings from California to Florida, and we rented California empty to a wealthy couple. We rented Boulevard Lane to a wealthy couple, and there are lots of wealthy families, of course, that they prefer to rent an elegant house while their own place is being remodeled, because they don't want to live through the remodel. When I was a kid, my parents would remodel and we would live through it, and no one complained about, the refrigerator is broken.
I have a daughter who's doing that right now in Nevada, in a very expensive area. Her husband is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and very successful.
Right.
So
So
I do know, but I had no idea that that's what you had done.
oh yeah, we
So I'm not, it's unlikely I'm going to see you in the next decade.
well, I'll be coming back for that Stanford thing in March. We're giving a little talk. I hope you're there, March 9.
Yeah.
We're giving a little talk and we'll do a little celebration for Wally. But yeah, I'll be there. I mean, I get to California about once or so a month. You know, I've got exceptional mileage on these airlines. There's actually, I know the flights, the exact flight schedule. It's actually not a bad flight. The Tampa nonstop flight to SFO is, with the tailwind, gets you in like 5 hours and 20 minutes. And of course, there's a time zone different change. So if you take the 6 a.m. flight, you're actually in California by like 9:30 a.m. California time. So you actually can get a day's worth of work done. Of course, you pay for it on the way back. You know, you pay for that time difference on the way back.
Well, when I was at the University of Florida and lived in Gainesville, the saying was that because the flights went from Gainesville to Atlanta,
Right.
saying was that even when you die, you have to go through Atlanta.
Particularly if you're on Delta, right? That's the hub.
So we had.
Right.
For a while, we had the United also.
No, Tampa's become quite a busy airport, and you could see, you could see what's happening here. Florida still has a lot of land, but they really just continue to develop it and continue to put housing in. And of course, there's a
they're ruining. They have already ruined and continue to ruin the ecology and the natural beauty of the state.
Well, I think that's always the trade-off. It's a little bit like Silicon Valley. There were a lot of orange trees and other beautiful things in Silicon Valley. It all became concrete in Stanford, right? I mean, the Stanford farm is still a farm, but every day you see some new building going up on that farm, right?
Yeah, when I moved there in 68, we had cherry tree orchards and almond tree orchards all over the place. Beautiful. And then they just disappeared. All disappeared. Well, that's good to know that you're living under such elegant conditions.
No, my view of life is spend the money for quality of life now. You don't know how long your life span is going to be. And let the last check to the IRS bounce. That's Wally's famous saying. He wanted the last check he sent to the IRS to bounce. And I just look at it like, hey, you know, your quality of life is worth a lot more than, and I've learned a lot about death over the last few years, a lot more than I ever understood before. And so you actually do start thinking in ways that put into perspective, how do you want to live as you get older and older? That's clear, right? I mean,
that's, I remember after Ruth died, one of my daughters took me around to all of the retirement homes in the Bay Area. And finally, I made what turned out to be a wise decision, and that was not to leave my home in Sea Ranch, where I have 2 acres of pine and fir and redwood trees and a 180-degree panoramic view of the Pacific that I can show you right now.
Yeah.
And my office is like sitting in 2 stories up and looking at this gorgeous view.
Right. You got the sun today? Because I heard it was foggy earlier.
Well, let me try to show you what's here. It's going to be a little awkward, but
you're going to turn your computer around. Okay, let's see.
It's going to be until I get it straightened out.
Yeah, no problem. I'll watch.
Because I got a bunch of wires.
Yeah, don't disconnect yourself. I don't want you to go nuts.
Well,
wow, you got a sunset playing out there, right? That's beautiful. Wow,
it's the marine layer. It's the marine layer.
Wow, that's gorgeous. Yeah, that's gorgeous. I could see why you're perched.
So I'm in my office, and that's my view.
You can't beat that, Len.
No, you can't.
Is that pine tree on your property?
Oh, yes. Everything beyond the pine tree. What's important is that the pine tree is about at the point of my property line.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, there's a hill that goes down to Highway 1.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that is the ocean that you can see.
Yeah.
So no one can build beyond my house. Between here and the ocean is called commons.
Nice.
Which means that it belongs to everybody.
Nice. But you really have a new view every day, because every day is a different.
And the sunsets are often spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have this sunny day today, but we have had some fog recently.
It looks great, Len, and you look like you're in good health and taking care of yourself. So
well, I try, as you know.
Keep it up, and I will see you in March, and I'm sure we'll talk before then.
Let me check. I think I have it in my calendar.
It's March 9.
12:15 to 1:15.
Right.
Yes, I do have it.
So we'll all head down there and hopefully have a good class, and we'll bring a birthday cake in, because Wally's birthday is the week later. But there's nothing like ending or beginning maybe the class with singing happy birthday to him, because I think he'll be 92 on March 15.
Yeah.
Because I want to say
he's a year younger than me.
Right. So it's interesting. You guys are both aging on your own. You both live in your own houses. You're a good
aging in place.
You're aging in place. And that's a really interesting topic in and of itself, because there's so few people these days that do it.
Most of them have infirmities to the extent that they can't do it.
Right. I mean, it's a really interesting set of data that if I were someone in the medical school, I would want to probe, like, how do you guys pull it off? Because you do, and you do it in your different styles and different ways. But I do think that my parents did stay in their own house for a long time. Then my dad died, and my brother sort of took care of my mother, but my mother really took care of him, is the way I look at it. And then once my brother died, my mother just kind of completely fell apart. I mean, just totally felt like her world ended. And at that point, she really didn't want to go into a nursing home. And that was kind of the instigation to come out. And then once we came out, the rest is history. But the interesting part is she never imagined that my brother would die ahead of her. She probably didn't even imagine that my father would die ahead of her, even though he was 6-7 years older than her. She always thought he was a lot stronger than she was. But it's an interesting thing, because I think different couples take different views about who's gonna outlive who and what's gonna happen. And of course, typically females outlive males. But in both your cases, both you and Wally outlived your respective wives, which is another rarity that played out. And you were both, I think, older by some number of years to your respective wives. I think Ruth Ann was maybe...
Ruth was a year and a half older than me.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that. And Ruth Ann? That's interesting. I didn't know that your wife and Ruth Ann had the same first name. I'm just realizing that now. It didn't dawn on me before that your wife Ruth and Ruth Ann sort of same first name. But I think Ruth Ann was a couple of years younger than Wally, right? Well, stay healthy, my man, and congratulations.
You too, Jack.
Congratulations, because I do think you will get the Nobel Prize. It's just the question of when. And then what do you do with all that money? Don't they give you like $1 million or something as part of it? Don't they give you like a big check?
That's only if you get the prize solely, but it's often split to
I see.
2 or 3 people.
Right. Interesting.
No, the money aspect of the prize is trivial.
Right.
Right. International recognition, but I have international
You
recognition.
have it. You have it. You don't need it.
I
You don't
don't
need it, but you're entitled to it. So my vote is in your favor. That's for sure.
I'm going to count on your vote.
Okay. Thanks very much, Len. See you later.
Thank you, Jack.
Sure, bye.
Stay well,
You
Mike.
too.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.